He survived car crashes, arrests, overdoses, and then 2012, Héctor Macho Camacho is found slumped in a car, shot, and surrounded by bags of cocaine. Was it a deal gone wrong? A targeted hit? Or payback for something darker? He had enemies, he had secrets, and justice didn't knock for 10 years. So how did one of boxing's brightest stars become a target? And why did it take a decade to name suspects? He's center ring in Vegas, team crowding his shoulders, that signature curl on his forehead, grin already breaking. The cards come in like hammer blows. He knows. Héctor Macho Camacho goes up on shoulders after schooling Jose Luis Ramirez for the WBC lightweight title. It's his apex, speed, swagger, spotless execution, peak macho. And here's the hard truth. That night is the summit and the edge of the cliff. He'll have big nights after this, sure, but he will never be that fighter again. The warning signs weren't subtle. Behind the glitter and the footwork was a lifestyle burning at both ends. Excess, drugs, chaos. The same demons that drove him to greatness were already eating him alive, dragging him toward the underbelly, addiction, bad company, and even worse decisions. So how do you get a champion? This bright and this self-destructive? Rewind. We need to start with the kid who became macho long before the ring walks. Born in Bayamon, Puerto Rico on May 24, 1962, Héctor Luis Camacho Matias was the second youngest of 5. Héctor Sr. and Maria's wild card. He wouldn't grow up on the island. After his parents split when he was 3, New York City became home, and the city hit back as hard as he did. What followed wasn't a tough childhood. It was chaos. Fights were routine, trouble constant, and violence felt normal. By 16, he'd fathered a child and landed in a correctional facility for stealing a car, already living fast, already skidding. When he returned home at the age of 17, the spiral was visible in plain sight. His mother caught him with cocaine, proof that the drug that would stalk him for decades was already in the house. You can see the future from here. The fuse is lit. Adults tried to fix what they didn't understand. 6 different psychiatrists saw him. None could name the wound, let alone close it. Schools didn't fare any better. He was expelled from at least 6. The system had no answers for a kid built like a live wire. Then came the first lifeline. A language teacher, Pat Flannery, did what the experts couldn't, gave him a direction. Karate and boxing weren't hobbies. They were rails to run on, a place to put the rage where it might make sense. When he came home from lockup, his mother flushed the stash, and young Héctor made a decision. He would pour everything into boxing, see if discipline could beat destiny. And for a while, it looked like it just might. But let's be honest about the timeline. Even as the gloves went on, the addiction had already climbed into the ring with him. The Hall of Fame career might have been coming, but so was the bill that always follows a life lived this hot. We'll get to the crash. First, the ascent, the kid who turned Spanish Harlem into macho time. And the nights when speed, angles, and audacity made him untouchable. Now, the boxing. He wasn't just promising, he was a problem. As an amateur, Camacho went 96-4 and bagged 3 Golden Gloves before turning pro in 1980 at just 18. That resume doesn't whisper talent, it screams fast track. The pro switch didn't rattle him. He ripped through opponents, stacking clean wins while flashing blistering hand speed and footwork that carved angles out of nowhere. The showmanship matched the skill, outrageous ring walk outfits, flamboyance for days, and the kind of flair that turns a crowd into believers. He had the looks, he had the persona. Where he grew up, he wasn't just a fighter, he was the pride. As for macho, even the origin story has layers. His father claimed he coined it because Héctor was his youngest son. Some say it was given to him by his mentor, Pat Flannery. Others say it was just a result of ring announcers not being able to pronounce his real name. Whatever the truth, Héctor owned it. And when he barked Macho time, everyone knew the gears were about to grind. It wasn't a catchphrase, it was a warning. It was his battle cry, and he could be heard shouting it at his opponents in the ring before he put his foot down. He'd stomp the gas, speed up the feet, sharpen the jab, change the angles, and turn rounds into runaways. Few could live at that pace, fewer still wanted to. His rise was unstoppable. It felt less like momentum and more like a surge, unavoidable, accelerating, inevitable. His first crack at gold came in just his 22nd fight. The reigning super featherweight champion, Bobby Chacon, wouldn't board the plane to Puerto Rico, so the belt went vacant. In stepped Rafael Limon, a hardened ex-champion with scars to prove it. And suddenly the kid from Spanish Harlem had to solve his first former world titleist under real lights, real stakes. He didn't blink. Camacho treated Limon like a problem to be timed and taken apart. Down in the third, down twice more in the fifth. When the referee waved it off, the message was unmistakable. This wasn't hype. This was hierarchy. Héctor Macho Camacho was a world champion. He defended the strap once, clean, but the belt on his shoulder only sharpened his appetite. The ceiling at 130 felt too low. He moved to lightweight, took a couple of calculated tune-ups to feel the weight in his legs, and then aimed straight at the division's gravest test, Jose Luis Ramirez, under the hard neon of Las Vegas. That night, he didn't just win a second world title. He authored what many still call the finest performance of his career. Speed weaponized, angles weaponized, ego smothered under craft. And yet, as his team hoisted him high, sequined trunks throwing sparks into the Vegas dark, you could sense the first rumbles. The same intensity that made him unstoppable in the ring had a way of detonating outside it. For men who live this fast, victory is often a cliff edge. The storm clouds were already building. Because when you live your life like Héctor Macho Camacho, the good times just can't go on forever. That Vegas masterclass against Ramirez was peak Camacho, but the warning signs were flashing bright for anyone willing to look past the lights. 2 fights before his first world title shot with Limon, he was due to face the live contender John Montez. But the night before the bout, he went on a cocaine tear so wild he tried to throw himself out of a hotel window. His team had to talk him back from the ledge, literally. As preparations for a serious fight against a significant opponent go, it's hard to script anything worse. And yet 12 hours later, he walked to the ring, grinned through the chaos, and erased Montez in under a round. That's the paradox of Macho. Self-destruct at midnight, dominate at noon. The talent wasn't just real, it was outrageous. But by then, his handlers knew exactly what they were babysitting. A generational fighter strapped to a live explosive. Manage him perfectly and you might get brilliance. Blink and you get a headline. And no, this wasn't an isolated meltdown. It was a pattern. The audience never saw the hotel window, the interventions, the panic. They only saw the costume reveals, the drum roll ring walks, the snap in his jab. A Camacho night wasn't just a fight, it was the show. When he declared Macho time, crowds leaned forward because they knew they were in for a treat. But behind the curtain, the bolts were already loosening. The brand was soaring, the fighter was fraying. And the gap between those two truths, inside the ropes and out, was widening with every win. Even in the early 80s, the alarms were already blaring. His former manager, Billy Giles, didn't mince words. Camacho was drowning in drugs. Not dabbling, drowning. And the stories that leaked out felt less like gossip and more like red flags with sirens attached. Take the traffic stop. He wasn't pulled over for flying down the highway. He was stopped for driving too slow. Odd, right? The officer walks up, flashlight in the window, and there's Camacho, with a woman on his lap. And no, she wasn't just sightseeing. It's reckless, brazen, the kind of scene that tells you the rules don't apply until suddenly they do. Then there's the story everyone close to him knows, the one with Rudy Gonzalez, childhood friend turned bodyguard. They're on a long haul from Florida to California. Somewhere in the dead stretch of highway, Gonzalez crashes out and lets Macho take the wheel. He wakes up to a different view, border signs, fast approaches, Tijuana flashing on the horizon. Camacho saw an ad for a night spot and decided to take an impromptu detour because of course he did. That's where the problem is. Camacho lets it slip, or admits it plainly, depending on who tells it, that there's a kilo of cocaine in the car. Gonzalez goes cold. This isn't party favor territory. This is felony weight, federal time, the prospect of spending the rest of his life in a cell. The jokes stop. The math gets real. Suddenly, with the Mexican border looming and the wrong kind of cargo in the back, Gonzalez tells him the only thing there is to say to a man like Camacho. It needs to be macho time. Right now, for real. Because the next few minutes aren't about showmanship. They're about whether both of them walk away or don't. Stay with me. They roll up on the border, fluorescents buzzing, boots on gravel, radios crackling. And Camacho does the most Camacho thing possible. He bails out of the car and starts yelling for Julio Cesar Chavez like he's ringside in Mexico City. Heads snap, guards swarm. In seconds, the panic turns into a meet and greet. Pens appear, autographs, photos, laughter. For a heartbeat, the crazy plan is actually working. Then the air changes. A canine catches scent and beelines for the car. Nose at the seams, tail stiff. The handler reads the dog's body like a tell. Something's in there. Gonzalez goes ice cold. This is the moment. The one where the night ends in cuffs. The handler pauses, looks from the car to Camacho, and taps the dog on the snout. Can't you see? This is Camacho. Just like that, the danger evaporates. The guards wave them off. They turn the car around and roll back into the dark, heart still punching through ribs. Somehow they've threaded the needle, but it doesn't stop there. As the adrenaline drains, Camacho pivots to salvation. He tells Gonzalez he's found Jesus, that they need to bury the kilo and be done with it. They stash the package and bolt, and for a few hours it feels like escape. But later that night, Gonzalez wakes up in their hotel to an empty bed. No Camacho. Hours later, the door swings open and Macho staggers in. Sweaty, covered in dirt, eyes wild. He went back. He couldn't find the buried stash. He needs Gonzalez to remember where they left it. "What about Jesus?" Gonzalez asks. "It's okay," Camacho says. "Jesus told me it's okay to have the cocaine." The story might be funny in its absolute outrageousness until you sit with it. This is compulsion. A man who was already in the grip, bargaining with heaven to keep walking the edge. This was the kind of thing that was going on in the background even before he captured his first world title. Which is why his rise isn't just impressive, it's borderline miraculous. With that kind of chaos humming behind the curtain, the fact that he became a champion at all feels like threading a needle at full sprint. And yet, as the addiction deepened, Camacho kept pushing forward, still stacking wins, still chasing legacy, even if, after Ramirez, the best version of Macho had probably already walked off stage. That doesn't mean his career suddenly dropped off a cliff. Far from it. He tried to unify at lightweight, but the other title holders stayed away. So he stayed busy and beat a future Hall of Fame trainer, Freddie Roach, in a non-title fight. Proof the hands and feet still had it. Then came Edwin Rosario at Madison Square Garden, and this is where the story turns. The fight starts well enough, Camacho in rhythm, snap in the jab, feet alive. But by the fifth, Rosario starts clawing back. For several rounds, Camacho is under real pressure. buzzed, backed up, forced to show a different kind of courage. He answers in 8 and 9, steadies the ship, then the momentum tilts again. Rosario closes hard, taking the final 3. The cards say split decision Camacho. But the truth says something else. That night cost him. He had to dig deeper than ever to keep the crown. The fight clearly took something out of him, and many believe the bout left him a diminished fighter. After Rosario, the risk appetite shrank. The showman who sliced angles and walked men onto counters became a defensive specialist, slicker, safer, less willing to wade into hell to prove a point. The version of Camacho who dismantled Ramirez only 2 fights earlier, we never saw him again. But he kept marching forward. After Rosario, Camacho stepped up again, targeting Ray Boom Boom Mancini for the inaugural WBO light welterweight belt. Different weight, same result, a gritty victory that pushed him to 34-0 and stamped him as more than a flash act, a 3-division world champion with proof. For a moment the narrative was simple. The kid from Spanish Harlem had climbed another mountain and planted the Macho flag on top. But the lifestyle doesn't negotiate. With the chaos outside the ropes accelerating, the 0 on his record was living on borrowed time. 2 non-title fights, 2 title defenses, and then the wall. Greg Haugen, under the hard desert lights at Caesar's Palace. The fight turned ugly early and stayed that way. By the 12th, the bad blood boiled over. Camacho refused to touch gloves. The ref docked him a point. On the cards, that mattered. Split decision, Haugen. The unbeaten aura shattered, but the controversy wasn't over. Even the ending couldn't just be clean. Post-fight tests flagged traces of an unidentified substance in Haugen's urine. The irony wrote itself. If you're wondering what a lab might have found in Camacho's system back then, so was everyone. Testing wasn't built to chase recreational use, only PEDs, and Haugen was the one who got tagged. A rematch was ordered, and this time Camacho dug in, recalibrated, and edged it. Split decision back his way, the belt returned to his shoulder, the rivalry deadlocked in bitterness and razor-thin margins. 1991 didn't end in the ring. Camacho got married, a decision that looked from the outside like a stabilizer. Spoiler, it wasn't. The couple went on to have 3 children, but the storm never settled. His own words told you everything. I like it, I love it. You met me like this, and I'm going to stay like this. By 1998, his wife had a restraining order. By 2001, they were divorced. Because this was Héctor Macho Camacho. After all, invincible in his mind, indestructible in his myth. The rules bent for him until they didn't. He did what he wanted, when he wanted, and no one, opponents, handlers, family, or the law, could stop him. There was one thing he couldn't will into existence: elite form. The slide came quiet at first, then obvious. The speed was still there in flashes, the feet still clever. But the edges dulled, the bite softened, and the big knight started tilting the other way. In the back half of his career, he shared rings with giants: Julio Cesar Chavez, Oscar de la Hoya, Felix Trinidad, and lost to all 3. No shame in the names, the results told the story. Against that caliber, half steps slow become whole fights gone. There were marquee wins, sure, but context mattered. He stopped a 41-year-old Sugar Ray Leonard, sending him into retirement and effectively closing the book on a legend who was already beyond empty. He also outpointed Roberto Duran, another icon from the Four Kings era. Only by then, Duran was running on fumes. By now, the split decisions and fading speed weren't the only stories. The chaos outside the ropes was closing in, and everything off-camera was roaring into frame. As the results in the ring grew erratic, the rest of his life slipped from messy to menacing, a slow-motion spin that felt less like turbulence and more like a spiral, loud, public, and impossible to ignore. The headlines started reading like a rap sheet. The arrests started stacking. Cocaine possession. An arrest after he allegedly assaulted a teenager he thought flashed him the middle finger. Sirens, summonses, court dates, each one another step down. Every incident chipped away at the myth of the untouchable showman and exposed the man underneath. Impulsive, volatile, and increasingly out of control. He even bragged about it, like recklessness was a resume. A Lotus, a Ferrari, a Lamborghini, a Corvette, all crashed. His logic was chilling and childish at once. As long as I have a license, I'll keep crashing. That's how you learn to drive. The metaphor couldn't be louder. Except when it came to his own life, he never found the brakes. Then came the burglary charge. On paper, a desperate drug bust. In reality, something darker and more tragic. You picture a desperate addict smashing a window for cash. But he wasn't caught prying open a register. He fell through the ceiling of a Mississippi electronics store, drunk, trying to break in to retrieve his own computer. When officers arrived, they also found ecstasy tablets on him. The court didn't shrug this one off. He was handed a 7-year sentence. In practice, most of it was suspended. He served a brief stretch and then a year of house arrest. No orange jumpsuit, no long bid, but the message should have been clear. Instead, it read like another escape in a life full of them. He avoided serious prison time, but the damage was done. A forced pause from the ring and a louder alarm than any corner ever rang. But the real story wasn't the hiatus. It was the glare of warning lights flashing from every direction. Legal trouble, substance abuse, reckless stunts, spelling out the same verdict for anyone willing to read it. This wasn't an eccentric champion living large. This was a man hurtling toward an ending you could feel coming long before it arrived. The signs weren't subtle. He just refused to read them. Lesson after lesson, life hammered the same message, and time again, Camacho kept slipping the punch, until he couldn't. 6 years after the electronics store fiasco, the headlines turned uglier. Arrested for assaulting his own son. He posted bail, packed up, and ran toward the past. Back to Bayamon, Puerto Rico. The place that made him, and in the end, unmade him. Home didn't heal him, it accelerated him. The nights got longer, the circles tighter. His son would later sum it up in 3 words: drugs, sex, and jail. Friends begged him to leave. Camacho said he wanted out, but by then, it felt like quicksand. Every step a little deeper, every promise a little thinner. Whether it was the chemicals, the company, or something more sinister tightening around him, the result was the same. He was stuck. Then came another omen, louder than the rest. That same year, 2 men approached his car. He hit the gas, and they opened fire. At least that's how he told it. No arrests, no charges. Afterward, he shrugged it off, saying they couldn't have known who he was. Everyone loves Macho, he insisted. Maybe, or maybe not. Because with the benefit of hindsight, the decision to walk away from the police reads differently. If this was just a botched carjacking, why not press it? Why not make noise, demand answers? Unless he already knew the answers, and knew the cost of saying them out loud. In a world where favors are traded and debts collect interest, silence is its own kind of confession. Was it fear? Pride? A code? Or a simple calculation that there was far more in play than a random street robbery? Whatever the reason, the pattern hardened. The danger wasn't theoretical anymore. It was at the window, pulling the trigger. And he still stayed in the neighborhood, still stayed in the life, as if daring the ending to arrive. With hindsight, that first carjacking feels less like a random scare and more like a preview, if that's what it even was. Either way, what came next seems grimly inevitable, and it still lands like a punch you don't see coming. A year and a half later, the shots came again. Night air, streetlights, the easy comfort of an old friend in the passenger seat, Adrian Mojica Moreno. Then an SUV slides by, windows dark, no words, only muzzle flashes. Instant chaos. Mojica Moreno never makes it. Camacho takes a round to the jaw. The path of that bullet reads like a surgeon's nightmare. It shatters 2 cervical vertebrae, slices through 3 of the 4 main arteries feeding his brain, and lodges in his shoulder. He's rushed to the hospital. At first, there's talk of survival. Paralysis, yes, but survival. By morning, the hope collapses. Cardiac arrest, catastrophic brain damage. Machines do the living. The heartbreaking decision no mother should ever face fell to his. End life support. This time, the fight was different, and he couldn't beat the count. Héctor Macho Camacho died days later. So who pulled the trigger, and why? This wasn't sloppy street crime. This was organized, deliberate, a hit with a message. The method, rolling SUV, tight grouping, no warning, looked like a job, not an accident. If the earlier shooting was a prelude, this was the score settling. Inside the car, police find 9 sealed baggies of cocaine and a 10th already open. They're pinned to Mojica Moreno, not Camacho, and the amounts scream personal use, not cartel inventory. But the presence of drugs wasn't nothing either, because personal use is one world, trade is another. And the borders between them, especially in a scene like Bayamon's, blur fast. Which raises the question nobody wanted to say out loud. Was there more to it? Was this about old debts, wrong company, the kind of favors you can't repay with cash? Let's lay out the possibilities. Not tabloid fantasy, but the kinds of scenarios people in that world quietly accept as normal. Debt and disrespect. In drug economies, the currency isn't just cash, it's face. Miss a payment, snub a local boss, owe the wrong crew a favor, and even a small debt can turn into a large message. A celebrity who assumes protection by charisma can accidentally offend the system. Old quarrels, new guns. Camacho's life was a trail of bruised egos, bar fights, street slights, impulsive confrontations. In a tight ecosystem, grudges don't expire, they compound. What looks like a fresh hit can be the rerun of an argument from years ago, only this time with a car full of armed men. The plaza tax. In territories with organized drug retail, outsiders, even famous ones, are expected to pay to play. Not necessarily for dealing, sometimes just for conducting your mess on someone else's corner. If you don't pay, someone collects with bullets. Proximity risk. Maybe the target wasn't even Camacho. Maybe it was Mojica Moreno or whoever supplied him. Sit next to the wrong person at the wrong time, and you inherit their enemies. That open baggie tells a story. They weren't sneaking, they were comfortable. Too comfortable for that neighborhood, that hour, that reputation. Collateral from higher stakes. Remember the earlier tale, a kilo in the car on a Florida-California drive, a near miss at the border, A buried stash that refused to stay buried. That's not recreational. That's somebody's inventory. Whether Camacho was the owner, the courier, or just the passenger, he'd already shown a willingness to hover near the business, to exploit his fame as a shield. Autographs in place of paperwork. Shields like that work until they don't. Now add the culture of silence. After the first shooting, he declines to press charges. Not interested in talking, he says. Was that bravado, denial, or an understanding that involving police makes everything worse? In those circles, cooperation can be more dangerous than the crime. And when the second shooting comes, nobody rushes to testify. Nobody wants to be the name on the report. Information has a price. Sometimes the price is your life. Here's the simplest way to read the contradictions. The baggies don't prove a trafficking empire, and the hit doesn't look like a junkie squabble. He lived for years in the overlap, celebrity access and underworld adjacency, trusting that charm and fame could keep the worst outcomes at bay. In the end, the questions that hang aren't the cute mysteries of a colorful career. They're the hard ones. How long can you orbit danger before gravity wins? How many warnings add up to a sentence? And when a man lives inside two worlds, which one claims him when the lights go out? Phones went dark, doors stayed closed, and every hallway whisper ended with a glance over the shoulder. Someone must have known what happened. This didn't feel like a crime of passion or a street beef gone sideways. It felt managed, the kind of violence that arrives on schedule and leaves no volunteers for the witness stand. Strip away the noise and you're left with a narrow set of ugly possibilities. A debt called in, a line crossed, a tax unpaid on the wrong corner. Not gym grudges, business, the timing, the method, the way the neighborhood swallowed its tongue, all point the same direction. Someone with reach decided a message needed sending. Later, when a documentary maker was researching a film about Camacho's life, one of the people he interviewed was shot in the face just 4 months after talking to him. Had he been too free with the information he shared? We can only speculate. Here's where the story narrows to an epilogue and a pulse. In 2022, a full decade after the shooting, authorities took 5 suspects into custody in connection with Camacho's killing. 3 already incarcerated in Florida on unrelated charges. 1 arrested in Bayamon, where the ambush took place, and a 5th already in a Puerto Rican prison. 2 more suspected figures had died in separate incidents during the intervening years. The case files are still thin in public, but for the first time there's a path, however fragile, toward accountability. When the arrests were announced, Camacho's mother said it plain: "Justice, justice has been done." And the fighter himself? Héctor Macho Camacho will be remembered for velocity and voltage, blinding hands, audacious angles, ring walks like stage shows, and that unmistakable war cry, Macho time. He will also be remembered as a brilliant, complicated man who carried chaos with him like a second pair of gloves. His friend Rudy Gonzalez once said that the kind of demons Camacho lived with don't leave. Without them, would he have been the greatest of his era, or no one at all? Maybe those same demons pushed him to rarefied heights and then dragged him over the edge. So what really happened in Bayamon? Was he a fallen icon who strayed into the wrong orbit? Or a marked man in a darker economy than most fans ever saw? Was the final act a random street hit? Or a ledger balanced by people who never signed their names? The evidence is scarce. The silence is loud. You decide. We're sure you've got your opinions on this one, so let us know what you think in the comments section below. And if you enjoyed this video, don't forget to hit the like button and subscribe to help us keep making more boxing content like this. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next one.